So, one of the challenges with communication is that we have so much that in ourselves that we communicate with. So it's our eyes, it's our face, it's our voice, it's our whole body. And depending on what context we're in, we sometimes can only use part of that, and sometimes we can use all of that. I did both radio and television broadcasting, as most broadcasters do. And in many ways, radio is much more difficult because, of course, you've only got your voice. On TV or in a visual medium or in person like this, you have all of the rest of you, which you can use as a communication medium. Yeah, let's see if this will work. Ah, there we go. So in some ways, it's a simple concept. It's about getting some thought from my brain into your brain. So something is happening in my brain, some idea and feeling, and I want to transfer it to you. So it's easy, it's only one idea, but we have two completely different brains. Mine and yours are very different. And two completely different mental environments, if you want. I'll just click that down there because it's, yeah, there we go. And therein lies the problem, because I have no idea what's happening in your brain. And we have different things that we want communicated. In most cases, in this scientific type of environment, it's sort of rational feelings of some sort, rational thought. But we have feelings and moods. And of course, this is maybe a bit more relevant to us in our personal lives, with our families and with our partners or whatever. And we have emotions. But all of these go into communication. And it's amazing. It was very frightening to me, actually, in some ways, when we, as Jay knows, broadcasters do frequently surveys of audiences, and it's amazing what people pick up from seeing you and the things that they understand from the way you present, which you don't even think about when you're doing it, about how you look and how you feel and how they feel when they see you and so on. It's actually can be a little bit, can be scary. So this idea of communication is about getting ideas, hopefully coherently, from one brain into another. This gentleman, who was Iranian by birth, but professor of these things, communication and psychology and so on, said only about 7% of your communication is expressed in what you say. This is a little bit rough. About 38%, he reckons. I mean, these percentages obviously are not to be taken in a scientific sense. They're broad. How you say it, your tone of voice, and so on, and how you look while you're saying it. Again, that depends on the context. Here, it's part of it. If I was on radio, it would be a different thing altogether. If you're on the telephone, at least the old telephones where you didn't have pictures as well, that would be also part of it. So the big picture to take from this is that communication is about a lot more than the words that you use, whether we like it or not. How we say it, and in the context of interpersonal communication, or indeed if you're on screen or whatever, how we look while we're saying it, how our body is, if you like, communicating, is an important part. Opera and theatre. Opera is a really rich art form because it has design, it has music, it has staging, it has dialogue of a sort. This is a still taken from an opera. I mean, look at this character. You don't have to hear what he's singing or saying if it's a theatre or an opera. You know, this is a very expressive pose which he is taking. So there's a communication happening just in that one still image from what is really a really rich form of communication. And this is just one tiny element of it. And yet,
there's strong communication there. Here's another image. This is actually a picture by an artist called Gray and Knuckle, and these people are ostensibly all sitting in a restaurant or the bar having a drink. So they don't look terribly comfortable. They're not like the sort of people you might want to sit down and have a drink with. Maybe. Not sure I would anyway. This is another still from an opera. And again, it's expressing an awful lot in that one image. I'm not sure that will be somebody, again, that you would trust. And it looks like somebody who's a little bit shifty. But here, you see these two, and you feel, yeah, there's communication around there. These two seem to be very, very close, very warm, all of that. So these are all very human things, very human elements of communication. And even though they're a long, long way from our scientific work in communication and our abilities and our efforts to communicate science, I think they still have something to tell us about this process of communication, about how we actually engage with the person who is listening, who is viewing. Because ultimately, if we have ideas and thoughts that we want to communicate, we really have to be aware of the user. I mean, this is what this is leading to, that communication is a two-way process. I mean, even now, communication is a two-way process. And this process of transferring an idea from one brain, one environment to another, really has to have a kind of a return leg. You have to be aware as the communicator what's happening in here in some way. You have to be thoughtful of it. Of course, it's easier in one-to-one. It's easier even in this context where there's people I can see and I can see your reaction. If I'm standing in front of a TV camera in an empty studio, which is typically what we do when we're broadcasting, we're just looking at a lens, you have to imagine that viewer, that listener, be they sitting at their sofa at home or in their kitchen, in their office, you have to put yourself to an extent in their shoes, in their seat, to have some sense of who you're speaking with. Otherwise, it's just words going out into the ether. So to communicate, to connect with them, even if it's to translate very technical information, and there used to be some sort of almost emotional connection. Otherwise, that channel gets blocked. And I think the communication cannot be terribly effective. So I think it's a fundamental in communication that we need, obviously, we focus on the message, but we need to focus also on who we are messaging to. And we do that in many, many ways. If we're delivering any service, I mean, communication is critical. Even if you go into a shop, bar to buy a beer, coffee, whatever, the interaction you have with the person at the counter and so on, with the person who comes to serve you, can make the difference between a good experience and I won't go there again. So it's important. So we have all these elements to ourselves. Our eyes are very small part of this, but very expressive. Our hands, I use my hands a lot, maybe too much. Our posture, maybe our legs even, that's not maybe so normal. But these are all elements that we can use. This is an interesting little cartoon, that if you're depressed, you're really on it. And look like you're depressed. Otherwise, you won't really be depressed. Just stand up straight. Now, it's a little bit more difficult than that. And of course, it's not. That's a bit simplistic. But there is something to it, that the way we walk, the way we carry ourselves, expresses something about our mental, our physical, our emotional state. And that transmits itself to other people very quickly. I think almost unconsciously, probably completely unconsciously, in fact, so that when we go to meet with another person, they've already formed some initial impression about this before we stick out our hand to say hello. And that impression colors how they respond to us. Scary thinking about that, because if we had to think about all these things all the time, our brains would just go into overdrive. But of course, most of it is handled completely subconsciously. So, what kind of person are you? And well, all of these body shapes and postures tell something. This again is some images. I'm just going from the individual to group. Maybe these people are all with some sort of collective. These are much more formally. But they lead people look like they're having a lot more fun. So again, these images tell us something about what's happening, even though they're very still images from what is a very rich art form, communication form. In this context, it's opera, but it could be theatre, it could be anything. This is an interesting thing I came across about bees, because we obviously are ultimately animals, and we've all evolved as animals through that work. And bees, or insects, I suppose, they're not quite in the same biological pathway as us, but they have these very complex methods of communication about how they inform their colleagues as to where they're going to get the best nectar. And it's really interesting how, we probably don't pay enough attention, at least I don't, and I'm not an expert in this area by any means, about how the animal world communicates without having the depth of language that we have developed as humans. They have developed other ways of communicating messages between themselves, which are very valid and for what they're doing, adequate. When we communicate, this is going just a wee bit more technical, but it kind of follows on from that. If we want to communicate a message, we need to think not just about the user, but also what medium are we using? Because different media rely on different strengths. If we're presenting something, if it's on television, television is a visual medium. So if we want a story, we need to have good visuals to back it up. I mean, you know that almost every culture has this. When you see the TV news, there'll be a story at the end, which is not really news, but it's about something that is kind of interesting, and they've got some great images, from a cat jumping on a dog or something odd. But because the image is there, the TV will use it. And it's not really a news story. It's not going to affect you or me in our daily life, but it's something that just grabs the attention. Of course, social media takes that to a whole other level. But to make the point that if you're working with TV, if somebody from like a TV journalist wants to come and talk to you about your work, have some good clear images. And by clear images, I don't mean a graph with, X, Y, and Z axes and all sorts of complex shapes, because for the viewer who is not a specialist, that will mean nothing. Simplify, 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 and have it ready for the TV journalists when they come, because they would like to use that. If you're talking about radio, then scripting, having a good script and having your points laid out, and voice quality. Voice quality is something which partly inherent and partly something that we can train ourselves to do. Certainly in terms of pacing our delivery, we can train ourselves to slow down a little bit, which is what most of us have to do when we're presenting compared to our normal speech. But voice quality is really important in radio. If you're listening, and certainly for me, maybe I'm not sure if I'm unduly sensitive in that respect, but if I'm listening to radio and I hear a harsh voice, I just want to turn it off. It just hurts my head. But if you hear a softer voice with a lot of good modulation, that just flows into you like music almost. And of course, that's culturally going to be different from one country to another, from one language to another, from one region to another. Print media, it's all about quality of the writing, and again, images, but be aware, obviously, if it's a black and white print medium, you need to make sure the image works in black and white. Simple, straightforward thing, but things that get overlooked at times. And the web, color, design, animation, there's a reason why we have web designers who know how to make use of that particular medium to bring together a different element of visual, of color, on words, script, on animation, on video, whatever it is. So, just is a little thing that I work with, and it's just a little bit about delivering services. Let's say it's a late night, you come home from work, you're tired, don't want to cook dinner, order a pizza. So you ring your local pizzeria, and you ask them to deliver, and what we got? So we open our bottle of wine, you sit down. So we need to have 4 things. We need to get pizza meats ordered. So if we order the calzone, we don't want the margarita. We need good nice pizza. Following is really good. To be hot one. And you're right on time. So only one of these really depends on the product. This one. The quality of the chef determines that. The rest, it's all about delivering. It's about delivering the service. And that delivery is not really anything to do with the quality of the product. So you can have an excellent product, but if you don't get the one you want, if it comes cold, if it comes late, you're not happy. And that's nothing to do with the product. So the delivery is really something which is important. So the management had to think about many things apart from hopefully hiring in a decent chef. They had to get an ordering system together. They had to let the person who took your order to be able to say, yes, we'll have that for you in about 35 minutes. They had to get some transport system, warm boxes, to make sure that the delivery drivers aren't going to get lost, and so on. Ooh, not sure where that can. Yes, the point is that this one is really about communication. So expectation, your expectation about what you will be enjoying is going to be very much informed by this. So if somebody tells you we'll be there in half an hour, but it's actually an hour and a half, you're not happy, even if what comes is really good. You're sitting there hungry for an hour, looking forward to your pizza. So there's a balance between expectation and delivery. And the communication is a really important part of that balance. A very wise man said to me about weather forecasting, you know, in the meteorological world, we put a lot of effort into improving the quality of our weather forecasts, which is correct. But we don't think about the expectation of our users. And if the expectation is rising more quickly than our capacity to increase the quality, the gap between the two of them is widening, and people will be less happy. So maybe we should think about lowering their expectation as well as improving our service. Maybe we don't want them to be no expectation, but we do want to make sure that that gap between expectation and delivery is important. And the communication is a critical part of that, because through communicating, we deliver an expectation. We make promises, either directly or indirectly, and those, if you like, form a view in the head of our users as to what they're going to receive. And if our delivery matches that, everybody's happy. If it doesn't, then not so much. Apologies to our colleagues online if my voice is not clear enough. I'm actually stepping quite close to the microphone, so for us, there are issues. But I just make the point, and this is my last slide, that managing expectations for our users is really just as important as working on delivering excellence in our services. Because if that gap, hopefully small gap, between their expectation and our performance, that really indicates
whether they're happy or not, and whether we ultimately have done our job properly. So thank you.